The rain drummed relentlessly against the window pane, its rhythmic patter filling the silence of the dimly lit room. Henry sat alone, his fingers idly tracing the rim of a chipped coffee mug. The flickering light from the lone bulb overhead cast elongated shadows on the peeling walls, giving the room an eerie, restless life of its own. On the table before him lay an antique mirror, its ornate silver frame tarnished by time and mystery. This mirror had been the centerpiece of conversation since he had purchased it from a small, inconspicuous shop tucked away in the labyrinthine streets of San Diego. The shopkeeper, an old man with a peculiar squint, had warned Henry about the mirror. "It doesn't just show reflections," he had said in a harsh tone. But Henry, amused by the dramatics and enchanted by the mirror's craftsmanship, dismissed the warning as the ramblings of an eccentric old man. Now, days later, the mirror rested on his table, its glass reflecting the dim light of the bulb. There was something unnerving about it, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It wasn't just a mirror, it felt like a presence, as though it watched him as intently as he watched it. As the clock struck midnight, a chill crept into the room, raising goosebumps on Henry's skin. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, and the rain outside seemed to grow louder, more insistent. He leaned closer to the mirror, his breath fogging the surface. And then he saw it. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. But as he stared harder, his heartbeat quickened. The reflection wasn't his. The man staring back at him had Henry's features, but twisted and distorted, with hollow eyes that seemed to peer into his very soul. The figure smiled, a crooked, unsettling grin that sent shivers down Henry's spine. "Who are you?" Henry whispered, his voice trembling. The reflection's lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, in an instant, the room plunged into darkness. The bulb overhead flickered and died, leaving Henry in complete blackness. His breathing grew ragged as he fumbled for his phone, the faint light from its screen illuminating the room just enough for him to see the mirror. The figure was still there, grinning, but now it seemed to move independently of him. It raised a hand and beckoned Henry closer. Against every instinct screaming at him to run, Henry felt compelled to obey. He inched closer to the mirror, his pulse pounding in his ears. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice cracking. The figure finally spoke, its voice a raspy whisper that echoed in Henry's mind. "You invited me. I am your reflection, your truth." Henry recoiled. "What are you talking about?" "Look deeper," the voice urged. "Face what you've hidden." Before Henry could react, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and he felt a force pulling him in. He tried to resist, his hands gripping the edges of the table, but it was futile. The room blurred around him, and within seconds, he was engulfed by the mirror. When the dizziness subsided, Henry found himself in a distorted version of his apartment. The furniture was there, but everything was twisted, like a grotesque funhouse. Shadows danced along the walls, whispering incoherent words. And then he saw his reflection, standing across the room, watching him with those hollow eyes. "Where am I?" Henry demanded, his voice echoing in the eerie silence. The reflection stepped closer, its movements fluid and unnatural. "This is the world you created," it said. "A place where every lie, every fear, every regret you've buried comes to life." Henry's mind raced, memories flooding back, things he'd done, choices he'd made, people he'd hurt. He'd always thought he could escape his past, but now it stood before him, manifest in the form of his distorted reflection. The whispers grew louder, the shadows closing in. Faces emerged from the darkness, familiar yet horrifying, people he had wronged, their eyes filled with accusation. Henry backed away, his heart hammering in his chest. "Stop it," he yelled. "This isn't real." The reflection laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated through the twisted space. "Real or not, you can't run from yourself. Face it, Henry. Face me." The shadows lunged at him, their cold, intangible forms wrapping around him like chains. Panic consumed him as he struggled, their grip tightening. The reflection approached, its grin widening. "Only one of us can leave," it said. "Are you strong enough to face your truth?" Henry's mind raced. He realized this wasn't just about survival, it was a test, a confrontation with his inner demons. Summoning every ounce of courage, he forced himself to meet the reflection's gaze. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at him. The reflection paused, its grin faltering. The shadows around Henry loosened their grip, retreating slightly. "Liar," the reflection hissed. "You've always been afraid. Afraid of failure, of judgment, of yourself." Henry clenched his fists. "Maybe I was. But not anymore." The reflection's form began to waver, its features distorting further. The whispers grew frantic, the shadows convulsing as if in agony. Henry took a step forward, his confidence growing. "You don't control me," he said. "I made mistakes, but they don't define me. I'm stronger than my fears." With those words, the mirror's world began to crumble. The shadows disintegrated, the twisted apartment dissolving into light. The reflection let out a final, anguished scream before shattering into 1,000 shards. Henry gasped as he was hurled back into his apartment, the real one. He stumbled, catching himself on the table. The mirror lay before him, its surface cracked but still intact. He stared at his reflection, seeing only himself this time. Tired but unbroken. The rain outside had stopped, the silence a welcome relief. Henry sat down, staring at the mirror. He knew he'd never look at his reflection the same way again. As he picked up the mirror to tuck it away, he whispered to himself, "Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight within." The screen fades to black, and my voice breaks the silence. What would you see if you looked into the mirror? Could you face your own demons? A pause, heavy with suspense. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us for more spine-chilling tales on bedtime horror stories. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.